You spend a lot of time in the book, and congratulations on how do you learn to cook? I mean, it is really a lost art. I mean, where do you start? You break down the genius pantry. Come on, how do we start? Give us some hints. I know nothing about a kitchen. That's not true, folks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It can be intimidating to the uninitiated, but I think you have to draw inspiration from parts of the world like the Mediterranean region, where they prioritize quality of ingredients over quantity of ingredients. So by stocking your kitchen with just a small handful of essentials, you can do so much. Having a good extra virgin olive oil, some really high quality salt. Now, if you're like me, you have 3 different kinds of salt in your kitchen. You've got your fine salt, you've got your coarse salt, and you've got your flake salt. I actually recommend having all 3 types of salt because salt generally is very inexpensive, but it's one of the best ways to elevate your cooking to restaurant quality. I love cooking, for example, a steak or a piece of fish, or even roast up some vegetables, and finishing whatever it is that I'm making with some flake salt. They do this in high-end steakhouses, and it's a very inexpensive way to really elevate the quality of your cooking and the experience of eating with a high-quality salt. Pepper, garlic powder, I mean, these are just the bare essentials, and you can do so much. I mean, you can make vegetables delicious with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, garlic, salt, pepper. I think that one of the biggest areas where people mess up with regard to home cooking is that they just don't season their food well. If you ask any professional chef what home chefs do wrong, they undersalt their food. Salt is crucially important. It lights up reward centers in our brain because salt, for the vast majority of our evolution, was actually provided a nutrient that was very hard to come by, right? Yep. Sodium. Sodium is actually a macro mineral, which means that for good health, you need to consume a relatively large amount of it every day. And once you cut out the ultra-processed packaged foods, the question then becomes, well, where are you getting your sodium from? Because, Dr. Gundry, it's only 11% of the sodium that Americans ingest every day that come from their own salt shakers and from the salt that they add to their own recipes. The vast majority of sodium that your average American ingests comes from ultra-processed foods, shelf-stable canned foods, fast food, and restaurant food. That's it. That's where all of that sodium comes from. But once you cut those foods out, to feel good, you need to bring salt back to the table. I find it very ironic that most registered dietitians will say, if they for whatever reason are advising you to cut down on your sodium intake, they'll say stop adding salt to your food. When the irony is that the number one source of sodium in the American diet, it isn't processed meat, it isn't canned foods, it's bread and rolls. But when was the last time you heard a registered dietitian tell you to avoid bread and rolls? No, they tell you to stop salting your food, making your life miserable, the life of your kids miserable probably, if you have them, because some of the healthiest foods in the supermarket, produce, right? Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, simply aren't palatable without adding a little bit of salt. So knowing how to salt your food, to me, that's the base of the culinary food pyramid, knowing how to season your food well.
Well, I'm going to keep pressing you. Where do you start? I mean, do you start cooking some eggs and working on the seasonings? You've got some cool egg recipes with broccoli in your book. I mean, just how do I start? I want my bowl of cereal every morning, Max. I have to have my bowl of cereal, which probably has folks. I did this for a patient a couple weeks ago. His bowl of rice checks had 14 teaspoons of sugar that was hidden on the label, and he thought he was eating a low sugar food, and he was shocked. So yeah, how do we start?
How do you start? Well, I think that one useful tip is that you should taste your food as you go, provided that it's safe to do so. But there are no points to be won for not tasting until you finish the dish. Sometimes people feel that it's it's more indicative of a skilled chef to not have to taste their food. But tasting as you go is a really great way to see how textures and flavors develop over time, over the course of the cooking process. And cooking low and slow is something that is also really important. Getting acquainted with lower cooking temperatures and spending more time in the cooking process. Getting rid of the cereal, for example, and bringing eggs back to the breakfast table is crucially important. Eggs, I actually have coined the term cognitive multivitamin to describe eggs. Egg yolks contain literally everything that nature, a little bit of everything that nature has deemed important to grow and sustain a healthy brain. It's no wonder that egg yolks are rich in cholesterol because the brain is rich in cholesterol. You don't need to eat cholesterol to support brain health, but typically, where you find dietary cholesterol, you find nutrients that are good for the brain. And the egg is the perfect illustration of that. It's got a little bit of vitamin B12, omega-3 fatty acids. And to cook a scramble well, most people, they make scrambles. Admittedly, people tend to make breakfast when they're in a rush. But the best scramble is going to come when you put the heat on as low a setting as possible and you constantly stir it, low and slow. A good scramble should take 10 minutes to cook. You're going to end up with eggs so good you've never had them as good as you will if you try cooking them low and slow, as opposed to overcooking, which most people do when they make a scramble. The danger with overcooking eggs, it's not just a culinary concern. You're potentially damaging the delicate fats and the cholesterol content of those eggs. You're causing oxidation of the delicate fats and the cholesterol that egg yolks contain. For me, I love to make a scramble on very low heat, constantly stirring, and doing that until just before the eggs get to a consistency that I like, because the eggs will continue to firm up after you take them off the heat. So you want to stir them until just before your desired consistency. You take it off the heat and you plate the eggs, and they'll continue to firm up. They'll continue to cook. So that's crucially important. The same way that you take a steak off the grill just before it gets to your desired temperature, because it continues to the core, it continues to heat up. So too with eggs, you want to take them off the heat just before. And they come out delicious, Dr. Gundry. And then you finish them with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, which we know is medicine for the brain. You throw on a little bit of flake salt, maybe nutritional yeast, which is a rich source of B vitamins, a food staple that I happen to love. And you've got yourself a killer dish that would rival any restaurant's egg dish.
I love your description of slow cooking in regards to a chicken leg. You make the point that one of the benefits of slow cooking is breaking down a basically inedible substance, collagen, and all these tendons in like a chicken leg. And you vividly describe biting into a kind of not well-cooked chicken leg and you go, oh, yeah, this doesn't taste good. But at the same time, if you spend some time slow cooking that chicken leg, like most traditional cultures have learned, you break down all that collagen into a succulent, easily absorbable food.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is another area where most people screw up in the kitchen. They cook these kinds of parts of the animal too fast, not allowing the collagen that they contain to break down and form gelatin, which is that super delicious, butter soft component that occurs when you cook collagen low and slow. Joints, like the chicken drumstick, chicken thigh, have 4 times the collagen content of chicken of chicken breast meat, for example, white meat.
Yeah.
And anybody who's ever bitten, and I even in restaurants, like I'm shocked when I bite into a chicken leg in a drumstick in a restaurant and it's undercooked, because you get all those tendons that are just gross. I'm sorry, but like if you're not cooking a chicken leg low and slow, a chicken leg cooked low and slow, the meat is fall off the bone. There's almost not a single component to the chicken leg that isn't delicious, right? when you cook it low and slow. And I think that's, I mean, that it's so crucially important. And I'll add that for people that are on low income, that have tight budgets with regard to cooking your meats low and slow is a fantastic way to economize, because you can buy whole chickens, and by cooking low and slow, you turn those parts of the chicken, drumsticks, chicken thighs, what have you, into amazing foods. And it's also a way to economize with regard to red meat, because you can buy cheaper cuts. If you can't afford the most pristine beef tenderloin, grass-fed ribeyes that you'd like to, well, guess what? You can buy cheaper cuts, and all you got to do is cook them low and slow, and it becomes this pull apart, fall off the bone. I mean, that's how brisket is made, right? Brisket is made by cooking beef. It's typically a very tough meat.
Yeah.
But the beauty of well-cooked brisket, it's been cooked low and slow. All the collagen melts down. It breaks apart the proteins, and it becomes butter soft. I've got a number of recipes that actually use those cheaper cuts of meat in my book, Genius Kitchen. It's so important. Ribs, for example. I don't know, Dr. Gundry, where you stand on ribs, but I happen to love a good rack of organic baby back ribs, and you can make the most amazing ribs in your home, in your oven. You don't need to go to a fancy barbecue restaurant and overpay for them. You can make them. All it takes is a little bit of time. In Genius Kitchen, I have the best dry rib rub you've ever had in your life. No added sugar, no, calorie dense sauce required. You just use this rub, you throw them on a rack of ribs, you put them in your oven, low and slow for 3.5, 4, 5 hours. I mean, the longer, the better. And it breaks down, again, the collagen, the connective tissue, and it makes the ribs fall off the bone. It's so great. And knowing how to cook like that, it's so empowering. And it's such a crowd pleaser as well, because again, these are foods, as you with regard to one of your questions earlier, Dr. Gundry, these are foods that we typically think of as being junk foods, right? Like going to a barbecue restaurant and indulging. But you can actually make all these same foods with just a few minor tweaks and make them actually quite healthy and just as delicious, if not more so.